My grandfather didn't need to raise his voice when he shattered the one truth everyone else at the table had spent years hiding from me. He just closed his hand around his napkin, opened his laptop, and asked, "Harper, did you see the update about your fund?" For a moment, the room fell into a strange silence. Brooke froze mid-smile. My father looked sick and my mother's fork slipped from her fingers. I felt the world tilt because I had no idea any fund existed under my name, and whatever Grandpa revealed next didn't just interrupt dinner, it rewrote everything I thought I knew about my family. Before I go any further, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever trusted your family just a little too much and ended up regretting it. Stories like mine don't happen in the dark, they happen right at the dinner table in front of people who smile at you while hiding the very thing you deserve to know. Stay with me. It gets worse. I didn't grow up thinking my family was broken. I grew up thinking I was the problem, the quiet one, the low-maintenance daughter, the one who supposedly didn't need much. That belief didn't come from one moment, it came from 100 small cuts disguised as normal life. One of the first came when I was 9, a humid summer evening, the dining room fan rattling like it was dying. Caroline plated Brooke's food, carefully arranging everything like she was feeding royalty. When she got to me, she paused, gave me half a scoop, then said, "You get overwhelmed when you eat too much." Brooke leaned over, smirking. "Guess who Mom loves more?" I laughed. "That's what I always did?" Laugh, swallow, shrink. But even at 9 it stung. By 12 the pattern was routine. I won second place in a statewide writing contest. My English teacher printed the story, proud enough to hand it to my parents herself. Caroline skimmed 3 lines, said, "We'll read it later." Brooke has rehearsal, and tossed it on the passenger seat. That night we sat for 2 hours in a gym full of hairspray and echoing music, while Brooke twirled under bright studio lights. No one ever mentioned my story again. I told myself it wasn't important, but it lodged in me like a pebble I kept stepping on. 17 was the year I learned to treat every question like a burden. Asking for anything felt like triggering an alarm. That was when Caroline mentioned almost carelessly that there would be extra help for college, nothing concrete, just a vague promise dropped between bites of dinner. I clung to it anyway. At the time I thought she meant emotional encouragement. I didn't know she was lying about something much bigger. Then came Brooke's scholarship ceremony. The auditorium smelled like perfume and new carpet cameras flashing non-stop. I didn't sit with my family. I was backstage steaming, Brooke's dress, fixing her makeup bag, holding her purse because Caroline said Brooke needs support. "Harper, you're good at that." When Brooke walked across the stage under blue-white lights, the applause roared. I stood in the wings holding a wrinkled garment bag. I told myself it didn't matter. But something in me hollowed out that night. The only person who ever looked at me without comparison was Grandpa Raymond. He showed up to my graduation when my parents couldn't get through traffic. He brought me books that felt like gifts, meant for my mind, not my role in the family. He once told me quiet people see everything. I didn't understand then. I do now. College was survival. My dorm smelled like burnt coffee and mildew. I worked late shifts at a grocery store, the neon lights buzzing like mosquitoes. One winter evening my card almost declined for a $22 grocery bill. I joked my way out of it, pretending I forgot to transfer money. But that night in my tiny room, I pressed my hand over my mouth to keep from sobbing. I thought it was normal. I thought everyone struggled like that. I thought being broke was just my fate. I was wrong. It was engineered. And the first real sign of that was something I didn't receive, a missing envelope that should have changed everything. The missing envelope became the first loose thread in a fabric my family never expected me to pull. It resurfaced during a phone call with Grandpa in my freshman year. I was sitting on my dorm bed wrapped in a cheap blanket that smelled like detergent and exhaustion when he said, "I hope the little gift I sent helped with books." I blinked. "What gift?" "The envelope I mailed after your graduation." Caroline said she passed it on. My stomach tightened. Something cold slipped under my skin. "I never got anything," I whispered. He paused just long enough to confirm he wasn't mistaken. "Strange," he murmured. "It had my initials on the seal. I should have asked more questions. I didn't. Back then asking felt dangerous. The next year I got sick fever, shaking, the kind of sick that makes the room spin. I called Caroline hoping for comfort. All she said was, "Harper, don't make everything dramatic. You can't flake on work every time you feel tired." So I dragged myself to my grocery shift, the store smelling like bleach and cold air, my body aching. When I got home, Jada, my roommate, pressed the back of her hand to my forehead and cursed under her breath. "Your mom let you work like this?" she demanded. I didn't answer. I didn't have words. It was Jada who first voiced the thing I'd been too conditioned to see. One night after my card declined for textbooks, she paid without hesitation and said, "Harper, your family has money. What are they doing?" I laughed it off. The truth would have felt insane, but her words stuck. Like someone had finally turned on a small flickering light inside me. Years passed, and the divide grew sharper. Holidays became performances. Brooke descending the stairs like a commercial model, Caroline adjusting her hair and praising her effortless beauty, Thomas smiling like he was reading from a script. I played my part, setting the table, fixing bulbs on the tree, receiving gifts that felt more like afterthoughts. One Christmas, Brooke unwrapped a luxury camera. I unwrapped a cheap planner with a clearance sticker still attached. Caroline laughed. "Don't be mad. I forgot to peel it off." I wasn't mad. I was numb. But the real break came the night I overheard my parents in the kitchen. I had stepped outside for air, snow crunching under my boots, when their voices drifted through the window. "Thomas Raymond set that fund up for Harper. She deserves to know. Caroline's sharp as a blade. She's not ready. And if you say one word, you'll regret it." Then silence the kind that isn't empty but full of threat. I backed away from the window, heart pounding, the cold biting my cheeks. For the first time, I saw my mother clearly, not as strict, not as overbearing, but as someone who needed me small. The next month another crack formed. Brooke called me during a break at work, her voice sugary. "Harp, do you have that envelope from Grandpa? Mom said you kept it?" My breath caught. What envelope? The one with his initials on the seal? That was it. The missing envelope. The one that never reached me. "I never got it," I said. Silence. Then Brooke recovered too quickly. "Well, maybe you lost it. Mom always said you're not organized." She hung up, and something inside me snapped into focus. The truth wasn't hiding, it was waiting. And all the cracks were about to converge at Thanksgiving. By 24, the life I lived and the life my family pretended I lived had become two completely different worlds. At the community college, I guided students who were terrified of failing. I watched them cry over textbook costs, over rent, over the fear of disappointing their parents. I understood that fear too well. My office always smelled like burnt coffee and buzzing printers, and sometimes when a student broke down in front of me, I felt like I was looking at a mirror of who I had been. Meanwhile, Brooke's life was turning into a highlight reel. She'd gone from local modeling to influencer brand polished perfection. Her posts were all morning light, perfect angles, and airy quotes. Caroline bragged about her like she'd built her from scratch. "Brooke understands the world," she'd say with a proud sigh at family dinners. "She has vision." Then she'd glance at me like I was a reminder of everything boring. I learned to pick at my food chew slowly and stay quiet. But silence can only hold so much. The first real fracture appeared the day I stopped by my parents' house without warning. Caroline's vanilla candles filled the hall. Brooke's new car, the second new one that year, sat in the driveway, polished to a shine. "Isn't it beautiful?" Caroline said, practically glowing as she traced a hand across the hood. "Who paid for it?" I asked. Her expression shifted tight, defensive. "Don't start. Brooke needs reliable transportation for work." "You don't." My father stood behind her, staring at the floor like it might swallow him. Brooke just smiled, that empty influencer smile. I nodded. Right. But the question carved deeper than she expected. Then came Christmas. Snow pressed against the windows, the house glowing with warm light. Brooke opened a high-end camera, the kind I couldn't afford even if I saved for months. She squealed, hugging Caroline. I opened a scented candle with a clearance sticker still stuck to the bottom. Caroline laughed awkwardly. "Oops, forgot to take that off." I forced a smile. "It's fine," but something in me tightened, sharp, steady. The next crack came when Brooke invited me to help with a live stream. "You're good with lights," she said, which really meant she needed free labor. Her studio smelled like makeup, hot ring lights, and artificial lavender. Halfway through the stream, someone asked her how she stayed financially independent. Brooke laughed. "My family believes in me. I just work harder than most people." Then she glanced sideways at me off camera. "Some of us need a little more help, right? Harp?" The chat erupted in laughing emojis. I kept adjusting the light like nothing happened. But inside, something cold settled. A week later, Jada found me surrounded by unpaid bills on our apartment floor. "Harper," she said, voice low, "this isn't normal. Your family has money. Why are you living like this?" I almost told her the truth. Then I realized I didn't have the truth. Just fragments, just cracks. But the biggest crack appeared unexpectedly. Grandpa Raymond showed up at my campus one snowy afternoon. He looked tired, more tired than I'd ever seen him. "Walk with me," he said. We circled the paths as salted snow crunched under our boots. He asked simple questions. Was I eating well? Did work treat me fairly? Did I need anything? I told him I was fine. He didn't look convinced. Before he left, he hugged me, firm, intentional. "You deserve the truth, Harper." The words hit harder than he probably meant them to. Truth. A word I hadn't realized had been missing from my life. And in that moment I felt it, the quiet shift in the air before a storm finally breaks. The storm finally began 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, on a night that should have been forgettable. I'd come home to grab a few things from my parents' attic. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and simmering onions, Caroline's usual attempt to make tension smell pleasant. As I climbed the stairs, my phone buzzed with a message from Jada. "Electricity overdue again. Did you pay it?" I paused on the landing, heart tightening. Another bill I couldn't cover. Another month of juggling things my family insisted I should somehow handle. Then I heard voices from my parents' room, low, sharp, urgent. "She's 26, Thomas." 26? "And she still needs hand-holding," Caroline hissed. "Maybe she wouldn't," my father whispered, "if she had access to know." The word cut like a blade. "I'm not repeating myself. She's not ready. She'd waste it. It's her money." Thomas tried again. A beat. Heavy. Buzzing. "Not anymore," she said. "And Ray won't find out, not if everyone does what they're supposed to." My breath stopped. Everyone. Meaning her. Meaning him. Meaning me, kept in line through ignorance. The next morning, I sat at their breakfast table pretending nothing was wrong. Caroline fussed over Brooke's vitamins. Thomas stared at his coffee as if waiting for it to forgive him. The orange juice tasted bitter, like swallowing acid. I studied them and thought, what else have you stolen? The following week came Brooke's engagement celebration, a rooftop venue strung with warm lights, champagne flutes clinking, everyone dressed in coordinated neutrals. Everyone except me, because Caroline forgot to tell me the theme. When Brooke's fiancé made a toast about how the Lane family built Brooke into the woman she is, a few guests looked at me. My plain dress, my awkward smile, my quiet presence. Brooke raised her glass eyes shining. And Harper's always been such a trooper supporting me, even when she doesn't have much going on. Soft laughter followed. Not cruel enough to call out, but cruel enough to burn. I swallowed it. But this time, it didn't go down smoothly. The real break, though, came in the middle of an ordinary workday. Brooke called. She never called. Harp, babe, do you have that contact sheet from Grandpa's attorney? I need it for a brand deal. My pen froze mid-note. What sheet? The envelope Grandpa sent years ago. Mom said you kept important stuff. A cold drop slid through me. What did it look like? A white envelope, thick, with his initials on the seal. The missing envelope. The one Grandpa swore he sent. My voice hollowed. I never got it. Silence, just long enough for the truth to flicker in her eyes even over the phone. Then she recovered. Well, maybe you lost it. Mom always said you're not organized. She hung up before I could respond. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay staring at the water stain on my ceiling like it might spell out every lie I'd swallowed. The pattern wasn't vague anymore. It was deliberate, precise, designed. 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, my father showed up at my apartment, something he had never done. Snow dusted his coat, his eyes were red, his posture small. Harper, he whispered, can I come in? He sat at my kitchen table, hands trembling. I tried, he said. I tried to tell you, more than once. Tell me what? The fund. What your grandfather set up, what your mother did. My stomach dropped. He went on, voice cracking. She told the bank you were unstable, that giving you money would disrupt your development. And I believed her. Why didn't you tell me? He broke, quiet tears shaking shoulders. Because she said if I interfered, I'd destroy the family. And I didn't want to lose her. I stared at him. The man who was supposed to protect me. My heart didn't break, it hardened. That was the moment I finally understood my family wasn't toxic by accident. It was intentional, structured, maintained. And Thanksgiving would be the first time all of us sat at the same table with the truth ready to detonate. Thanksgiving at Grandpa's house always looked like a postcard, warm lights glowing through tall windows, soft music humming in the background, the smell of rosemary and turkey drifting through every room. But that night, the warmth felt staged, like someone had painted it on and forgotten the edges. I walked in wearing the same cardigan I'd worn for the last 3 holidays. Brooke followed behind me in a cream coat that looked straight off a magazine cover. Caroline floated into the room with her usual polished smile. Thomas lingered near the door, already looking like he wished he were somewhere else. Something in the air buzzed, quiet, electric, expectant. We sat at the long dining table as candles flickered against polished silverware. Brooke launched into a story about a sponsorship she'd secured. Caroline nodded like a proud manager. Thomas commented on the weather. I barely tasted my food. My chest felt tight, like my ribs were waiting for impact. And then it happened. In the middle of Brooke describing her content schedule, Grandpa set his fork down. The tiny clink against the plate sliced the room open. Harper, he said, voice steady. Did you get the email about your fund? Silence? Caroline's smile vanished. Brooke froze her hand, still mid-gesture. Thomas inhaled too sharply, choking on air. My heart thudded once hard. What I asked? Your trust fund, Grandpa repeated. The annual report went out last week. Caroline recovered first. Dad, she said too quickly. There's been a misunderstanding. Harper doesn't have Grandpa clicked the trackpad. The laptop screen glowed, casting pale light across our faces. Rows of emails appeared, 10 years worth. Beneficiary update, annual statement, contact confirmation. My pulse roared in my ears. The listed contact wasn't mine. It was a variation of my mother's one she used only for finances. I felt my throat tighten. Why is her email there? I whispered. Brooke shifted in her seat. Thomas stared at his plate like it might save him. Caroline's jaw locked. I'd like an explanation, Grandpa said. Caroline's voice sharpened. Dad, you're misunderstanding. No, he interrupted, tone cold. The IP logs show the change came from your home, 10 years ago. And 5 years ago you contacted the bank claiming Harper was emotionally unstable and should not have access to her own account. The room cracked open. Unstable, I said. You told them that Caroline didn't look at me. Harper, stop overreacting. I did what I had to do to protect you. From my own money, Brooke's voice trembled. Mom. Grandpa clicked another file. A PDF opened, one line highlighted. A withdrawal. A large amount. 3 years earlier. Paid to a company tied to Brooke. My eyes snapped to her. You took my money! She shook her head too fast. I didn't know it was yours. Mom said she said you didn't need it. Caroline's voice cracked. She had a crisis. I was helping her. You were stealing from me, I said. Not loud, not shaking, just clear. The room felt colder than winter. I stood. My chair scraped the hardwood with a sound that made Brooke flinch. This ends tonight. Caroline finally looked at me, fear flickering behind her carefully built walls. Harper, don't do something you'll regret. I held her stare steady. I'm not the one who should be worried about regrets. Grandpa closed the laptop with a decisive thud. We're moving to the study. All of us. And just like that, the truth my family had buried for a decade finally clawed its way to the surface. And none of us would leave that room the same. Grandpa's study always felt intimidating, dark wood, clean lines, the faint smell of leather and old books. But that night, it felt like a courtroom. He placed the laptop on his desk, opened it again, and nodded toward the chair he'd pulled out for me. I didn't sit. Mr. Collins is on standby, Grandpa said as he dialed the bank advisor on speaker. His voice didn't shake. Mine didn't either. Caroline flinched the second Mr. Collins answered. We've reviewed the account history, he said, tone even. The beneficiary email was replaced intentionally, and the freeze request was submitted 5 years ago, citing mental instability and poor decision-making. Every word hit like a hammer. Caroline's voice cracked. This is being taken out of context. I was protecting Harper. No, I said. You were protecting your control. Brooke stood by the doorway, twisting her rings until her fingers reddened. Mom said you didn't want the money, she whispered. I didn't think. You never think, I replied. Not cruel, just honest. Grandpa tapped the desk. Mr. Collins, restore all access to my granddaughter immediately. Within minutes, every notification statement and authorization shifted into my name. Hearing my email spoken aloud by a bank advisor felt like stepping into a life I should have lived years earlier. Then a soft ping echoed from the laptop. A new folder appeared. Documents added. Mr. Collins hesitated. It seems additional statements have populated. You may want to review them privately. I opened the folder. More withdrawals, more transfers, and a few sent to accounts labeled with my mother's initials. Caroline's breath broke. Harper, sweetheart, we can work this out quietly. No. The word came out clean sharp. Quiet is how you got away with it. I closed the laptop gently, like sealing a verdict. I'm going to review every file I said, and then I'll decide what happens next. Caroline's face strained. You wouldn't take legal action against your own family. I met her eyes. Calm. Certain. You stopped being my family the moment you stole my future. Grandpa walked me to the front door. Whatever you choose, he said, you're not facing this alone. Outside, the cold air hit my lungs like clarity. I stepped off the porch, the laptop tucked under my arm, no longer just evidence. A weapon. And for the first time in my life, the silence belonged to me. If you've ever stood in a room full of people who were supposed to love you and felt completely unseen, I want you to know this, you're not wrong for wanting the truth. That night didn't break me. It finally pushed me to open my eyes. Taking back my trust fund was only the first step. There are documents I still haven't read, decisions I still have to make, and a truth my family has no idea is coming. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own home, subscribe. This story isn't over.